This video is brought to you by Upstart, a lender who look beyond your credit score and provide a great solution for paying off credit card debt or other high-interest loans with a smaller interest solution. Get started at upstart.com/brainfood. More on them in a bit. And in the video today, we're answering a viewer question because Backlol asks us, where did the word fuck come from? In its various incarnations, the F word can be a noun, verb, adjective, and even an infix. The Swiss Army knife of the English language, this word has been adding spice to our conversations for centuries, even if our forebears were loath to write it down. So, where did it come from? First, to dispel a widely touted myth. You'll often read the origin of one of the most useful words in the English language is an acronym based on either fornication under command or consent of the king. Purportedly, the king trying to increase birth rates or alternatively restricting the act to put a halt to the spread of disease, or booked for unlawful carnal knowledge, for those being arrested for such. However, beyond there being zero evidence of either of these or any other acronymic origin of the F word, it's worth pointing out that prior to the mid-20th century, while abbreviations were prevalent in text, pronouncing them as words was not something people did. This is actually an extremely modern phenomenon. In fact, according to linguist David Wilton, there is only one known pre-20th century English word with an acronymic origin, and it was in vogue for only a short time in 1886. The word is Calendaries or Calinda, an acronym for the Colonial and Indian Exposition held in London that year. Combined with the lack of evidence supporting such an origin, we can safely dismiss origin stories like these. Moving on from there, the first documented instance of some version of the F word appears in a name, that of John Le Fucker, in 1278. The problem with this one is the original record of the name has been lost, so we have only a reference to it rather than any context. It's been speculated, given the lack of others with this surname around this time, this may have been a typo of sorts. For example, Tucker being meant. It's also been speculated that it was a variant of Fulcher meaning soldier. And even if it was correctly spelled, again, we have no context to what was meant. Whatever is going on with Le Fucker, about a decade later in 1286, there is an individual with the surname Fuckerbeggar. Whatever is going on with Le Fucker, Whatever is going on with Le Fucker, about a decade later in 1286, there is an individual with the surname Fuckerbeggar, recorded as one of King Edward I's servants who managed his horses. As for what Fuckerbeggar's first name was, we'll leave you to discern it, as we can't really tell from this image what it was. As with Le Fucker, it's not clear from his name what the fuck part was referring to, with the leading hypothesis being a striker of some sort. Or if how we use it today, maybe the poor guy was just desperate. Picking up steam in 1290 in Ipswich, we have not one but two fuckers. One Simon Fuckabottery and William Sammelfuck. Unfortunately for the amusement of our inner 12-year-old selves, Simon having a last name pronounced fuck butter was probably just referring to the striking or churning of butter. Or we suppose he could have enjoyed churning that butter with his appendage rather than using a churn dash. We're not here to judge you, Simon. Similarly, Mr. Smallfuck probably wasn't a little fuck, speculated to perhaps be referring to small fuck sales. Moving on, we have one Roger Fuck Bythenovaili. The record of poor Roger was uncovered by medieval history professor Dr. Paul Booth in 2015. At the time, he was researching an entirely unrelated thing when he came across a December the 8th, 1310 court record from Chester, England, in which Mr. Fuck Bythenovaili had that name applied to him thrice, getting rid of the possibility of any typos or things like that. Of course, even here, it can't be definitively said the fuck part meant as we'd think of it today. But given the rest of the name, it certainly does seem possible. As Dr. Booth states, this surname is presumably a nickname. I suggest it could either mean an actual attempt at copulation by an inexperienced youth, later reported by a rejected girlfriend, or an equivalent of the word dimwit, i.e. a man who might think that that was the correct way to go about it. Either way, let's all pause and appreciate the fact that all that will ever be remembered of poor Roger was the fact that maybe he was an idiot or just really, really bad at sex. And incidentally, what makes this one even more humorous is that around the 17th century, to Roger came to mean to have sex with or to penetrate, from a slang for penis at the time. Meaning if you combine the two slang terms across the centuries, he was penis fuck Bythenovaili. This also perhaps gives a new perspective on the Jolly Roger pirate flag name, although its origin isn't definitively known. Anyway, so that's a lot of speculation. When did the word we all know and love today more definitively come to be? The first documented explicit use of the word fuck appears in a poem by Scottish poet and one-time friar William Dunbar, who wrote around 1503 in his Anne Brash of Wowing, "Yit be his ferries, he will have fuck it," or in context and translated, he embraced tight, he kissed and groped, and with the feeling he was overcome, it be his manner he would have fucked, you break my heart, my lovely one. In yet another example around this time, this one encrypted, the unknown author of the poem Flen Fleas accused the friars of Ely of getting down and dirty with the ladies, writing sometime in the late 15th century this, which I'm not even going to try to read. After the key to the cipher is applied, this results in a poem that is a mix of Latin and English, and the pertinent word being fecant. Notably here, the author is Latinizing the then French word fuck, which was common at the time when the person didn't know the Latin equivalent of the English word, or if one didn't seem to exist. Translating it fully to English, the passage is, "The Carmelite brothers sail in a boat by Ely. They are not in heaven since they fecant the wives of Ely. All became drenched, for they had no steersman. Brothers with knives go about and swive men's wives." This early documented account also hints at how fuck became a swear word in the first place, given that swive, literally meaning swivel but figuratively meaning sex, was also censored in the passage. In essence, fuck was a taboo word simply because it directly referred to sex. That said, not everyone so censored themselves with the F-bomb. Fast forwarding to 1528, an unknown person wrote in the margins of a copy of Cicero's De Officiis, on duties, which was more or less a moral guide, "O.D. fucking Abbot." It is generally thought the D here stood for damn or damned, and was a curse word too far to the individual who wrote this. Given the context here, it's not clear whether said individual was referring to the fact that the abbot was perhaps having sex with women, and thus damned, or whether he was using it sort of like, "Damned fucking abbot man, he's the worst." Whatever the case, just 7 years later, Sir David Lindsay wrote in his Anne satire of the Third Estate, "Bishops may fuck their fill and beaver marry it," giving us the first known instance of the common spelling of the four-letter version of the word today. So this all brings us to where the word came from. Given the timing and location of these first known definitive instances, the two leading hypotheses are, first, that it probably derived from one of the many flavors of the German fuck or fucken, for example, the German ficken, meaning to make quick movements to and fro. This line of words, in turn, is speculated to come from the Proto-Indo-European pug, meaning to strike or hit. Somewhat similarly, the other leading hypothesis is that given the term seems to have come from around northern England or Scotland, whose language would be influenced by Viking invasions, the word may have Old Norse origins. Those advocating for this hypothesis point to the Norwegian fucker, meaning to copulate, or the Swedish focker, meaning to copulate, strike, push, which in turn may have derived from an Old Norse version of the words, which may have birthed the English fuck. Whatever the case, the word would soon find its way into John Florio's 1598 Italian-English dictionary, a world of words, such as defining fottatrice as a woman fucker, swiver, etc., and seems to have been pretty ubiquitous at this point. That said, an interesting note on this one is by the late 18th century, the word almost completely disappeared from pretty much every prominent English dictionary until around the middle of the 20th century, when, in 1965, the Penguin Dictionary decided they didn't give a fuck, and so gave its readers fuck. Of course, despite this moratorium on the word in print during this rather lengthy period, it seems to have still been commonly used in speech. For example, it is noted by John Brophy in his 1930 Songs of Slang of the British Soldier, the use of fuck became so common that an effective way for the soldier to express this emotion was to omit this word. Thus, if the sergeant said, "Get your fucking rifles," it was understood as a matter of routine. But if he said, "Get your rifles," there was an immediate implication of urgency and danger. Speaking of urgency, if you happen to need a loan for something and want it quick and easy, unlike going through a similar loan process with traditional banks, today's sponsor, Upstart. Upstart are a lender who look beyond your credit score and provide a great solution for paying off credit card debt or other high-interest loans with a smaller interest solution. So normally when you want a loan, a bank will have a look at this magical number and they'll decide entirely based on that number whether they're going to give you a loan. That number's a credit score. Upstart look at other stuff like your education level, your employment history, because As you can imagine, those are kind of important factors, and all of this leads to you getting a smarter interest rate. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had a bunch of smaller, high-interest debts like credit cards going on and I had to pay them all every month, that would stress me out. So go to upstart.com/brainfood, you fill out a form, it takes 5 minutes, and they'll tell you what sort of rate you can get. If you want, they'll then approve you, and you can get that money next day and get all of your stuff paid off, and then you've only got to worry about one single payment at a better rate. 400,000 people have done it so far. They're number one for this sort of business on Trustpilot out of over 300 businesses like this. So get rid of that credit card debt through consolidation at upstart.com/brainfood. There's a link below, and let's get into the bonus facts. So at this point, you might be wondering where various phrases that include the F-bomb came from. We'll start with flying fuck. The first known instance of this appears in Thomas Rowlandson's early 19th century poem, New Feats of Horsemanship. This also helpfully included an illustration of a man and a woman having the historic version of car sex. In the poem, he writes, "Well mounted on a mettled steed, famed for his strength as well as speed, Karina and her favourite buck are pleased to have a flying fuck. Whether o'er the downs the courser strains, with fiery eyes and loosened reins, around his neck her arms she flings, behind her buttocks move like springs, while Jack leaps time to every motion, and pours in love's delicious potion." As for not giving a fuck, we have the earliest documented instance of this in a 1790 poem by George Tucker, in which it states, "God your books, the testy father said, I'd not give a fuck for all you've read." The next known instance of this basic sentiment didn't pop up until just under a century later in 1879 in a pantomime titled Harlequin, Prince Cherrytop, and the Good Fairy Fairfuck. The general story here is of a prince by the name of Cherrytop who ends up a slave to the evil demon of masturbation. In to save the day is the good fairy Fairfuck and the princess Shove-it-Upper. In this work, which would be social media gold if properly performed today, appears the following line, "For all your threats, I don't care a fuck. I'll never leave my princely darling duck." As for the sense of screwing someone out of something, we have an 1866 affidavit in which it states a man by the name of Mr. Baker would be fucked out of his money by Mr. Brown. Interestingly, on this one, the notary who recorded this sentence states, "Before putting down the word as used by the witness, I requested him to reflect upon the language he attributed to Mr. Baker and not to impute to him an outrage upon all that was decent." As for someone telling another to go fuck themselves, an early documented account of this can be found thanks to one Mary Hamilton in 1836 being charged with obscene language after calling a group of women on the streets bloody whores and telling them to go and fuck themselves. Moving on from there, thanks to Melissa Moore, author of Holy Shit, A Brief History of Swearing, we know the first known case of fucking bitch was written in 1857 in a story by an abolitionist where he writes of a slaveholder beating one of his slaves. Said woman then cries out, "Oh Lord." In response, the slaveholder tells her, "Hush, you fucking bitch. Will you take the name of the Lord in vain on the Sabbath day?" Finally, the crowd favorite motherfucker was written down in the transcript of an 1889 Texas murder trial in which it was alleged the person murdered had exclaimed to the person who then allegedly murdered him, "Goddamn motherfucker, bastardly son of a bitch." So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, smash that like button below. Do not forget to subscribe. Check out our fantastic sponsor, Upstart, link below. And thank you for fucking watching.